People inside the studio did not know why the lights suddenly dimmed. The cameras were already rolling, the crowd was excited, and Oprah was preparing to introduce her next guest. But something felt strange. Something felt heavy. And before anyone could understand what was happening, the doors on the side of the stage opened, and Keanu Reeves walked out silently, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories on his shoulders. The audience gasped. Even Oprah froze for a second because Keanu was not scheduled to appear at that moment. No one had told her. The producers looked confused. But the biggest shock was on the face of Sandra Bullock, who was standing backstage with her hands trembling. She had not seen Keanu in years, not like this, not in a moment where her heart was already fragile. Earlier that morning, a cruel rumor had spread online about Sandra, a rumor that blamed her for something she had never done. It made her look heartless, selfish, and careless. Millions of people had shared it without checking the truth. She had arrived at the studio with a forced smile, but inside she felt humiliated, exposed, and alone. Even walking onto the stage felt like a punishment. She believed the audience would judge her. She believed the world had turned its back on her. And then Keanu stepped forward. He did not smile. He did not wave. He walked with slow, steady steps, as if he had made a choice he could not delay anymore. His eyes were soft but intense, carrying the kind of emotion that makes even strangers feel something deep in their chest. The entire studio became silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, like it is waiting for a truth to be spoken. Oprah finally whispered, barely breathing, "Keanu, what are you doing here?" But he did not answer her. He turned toward the side of the stage instead. He looked directly at Sandra, even though she was half hidden behind a curtain. The moment she realized he was looking at her, her heart dropped. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. She wanted to pretend that the pain she felt inside wasn't real. But Keanu lifted his hand gently, signaling her to come forward. Every camera turned. Every person leaned in. Sandra hesitated, not because she was afraid of Keanu, but because she didn't think she deserved kindness from anyone after the horrible comments she had read that morning. But Keanu kept his hand up, his eyes soft, telling her something without words. "You are not alone today." Her steps were shaky as she entered the bright light of the stage. She avoided looking at the audience. She avoided looking at the cameras. She kept her eyes on the floor until Keanu stepped closer, and in a calm, deep voice that almost broke a few hearts in the front row, he said, "Sandra, look at me." She finally lifted her eyes. He saw it all. The hurt, the humiliation, the exhaustion she tried to hide. In that moment, he knew she had been carrying far more than anyone realized. Keanu took a breath and then did something no one expected. Something that made people in the audience cover their mouths. Something that made even Oprah's eyes widen. He said, "Before the world judges her, I want to tell everyone the truth." A wave of whispers moved across the room. Sandra froze. Oprah leaned forward, completely alert. Keanu continued, his voice steady but full of emotion. "People think they know what happened. They think they know her, but they don't. And I can't stay quiet anymore." Sandra shook her head softly, tears already forming. She whispered, "Keanu, please, you don't have to do this." But Keanu stepped closer, close enough that the audience could feel the tension between them like electricity. "Yes," he said softly. "I do, because you deserve someone to stand beside you today." His words hit her heart like a wave. She looked down, holding back tears, but Keanu gently touched her hand, grounding her. And then, as millions of viewers would soon watch online, Keanu turned to the audience and said the first truth that would change everything. Sandra did something kind, something brave, something nobody knows. Gasps filled the room. People leaned in. Cameras zoomed closer. Oprah whispered, "What happened, Keanu?" Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, preparing himself. "She saved someone's life," he said quietly. The room exploded with shock. And this was only the beginning. The studio went silent again, but this time it was not because of confusion. It was because every heart in that room felt the weight of Keanu's words. Sandra Bullock saved someone's life. People stared at her with new eyes, unsure what story they were about to hear, unsure why she looked so shaken, unsure why Keanu seemed protective in a way no one had ever seen before. Oprah slowly leaned forward, her voice steady yet emotional. "Keanu, whose life did she save?" Keanu looked at Sandra first, as if asking for her silent permission. She shook her head slightly, her eyes filled with fear, but there was something else there too, a deep hurt that she had swallowed for too long. Keanu squeezed her hand gently and whispered so only she could hear, "You don't have to be alone in this anymore. She closed her eyes and took a soft breath. Something inside her finally loosened, something she had held tight for years. She nodded slowly. Keanu turned to the audience, his expression full of truth. She saved someone she didn't even know, someone who hurt her, someone who said terrible things about her before the truth came out. The crowd gasped again. The story was already shocking, but now it was turning into something deeper, something raw. Sandra's chin trembled as she struggled to stay composed. The rumor that had humiliated her that morning suddenly felt very small compared to what Keanu was saying. But Keanu wasn't done. He continued, years ago, before any cameras were watching, Sandra helped a young woman who had collapsed on a street corner. People walked past her. People ignored her. People assumed she was drunk or acting, but Sandra stopped. She stayed with her. She called for help. She held her hand until the ambulance arrived. Sandra whispered, "Keanu, please." But he shook his head. "People need to know the truth." Oprah asked gently, "What happened after that?" Keanu's voice softened even more. "The girl survived. Sandra never told anyone. She asked the doctors not to put her name on any report. She didn't want attention. She didn't want praise. She just wanted the girl to live." The audience stared at Sandra with shock and admiration. Even the camera operators paused, forgetting for a moment that this was a television show. It felt like a confession being shared inside a sacred room. But Oprah noticed something. "Keanu, you said the girl had hurt Sandra." Keanu nodded. "Yes. After she recovered, that same girl spread lies about Sandra online. She said Sandra ignored her. She said Sandra walked past her. She made videos accusing her. It became a whole movement against Sandra for months." The crowd reacted with disbelief. Sandra looked down, tears falling slowly, quietly. She had lived through that pain without telling the world what really happened. She had allowed herself to be blamed for something she didn't do because she never wanted to expose the girl who had been struggling with her life. Oprah placed a hand over her chest. "You protected someone who destroyed your reputation." Sandra wiped her eyes and whispered, "She was troubled. She was hurting. I didn't want to add more pain to her life." Keanu looked at her with such deep respect that even viewers watching from home would feel something shift inside them. It wasn't the look of a friend. It wasn't the look of a co-star. It was something stronger, something that spoke of history, loyalty, and a kind of love that never tries to show off. Oprah whispered, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sandra shook her head. "Because the world doesn't need to know everything. Because kindness means nothing if you only do it to be praised. Because I didn't want her to feel ashamed. I thought the pain would go away on its own. But this morning, the rumor, it reopened everything." Her voice broke. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold herself together. Keanu stepped closer, his voice low but powerful. "People humiliated her today for something she didn't do, and she still stayed quiet. She still refused to speak badly about the girl who hurt her. How many people in this world would do that?" The room was filled with emotions now. Some people were crying silently. Others were shaking their heads in disbelief. The audience felt connected to Sandra in a new way. They felt protective of her. They felt guilty for the times they believed rumors. They felt something they didn't expect to feel in a talk show. Keanu continued, "She didn't want the truth told, but I couldn't watch her walk alone into this storm again." Sandra looked at him with wide, emotional eyes. "Keanu, why now?" Keanu took a breath, his voice cracking slightly. "Because something happened last night." The audience leaned in. Oprah whispered, "What happened?" Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, as if replaying a memory that still hurt. "I found out something that made me realize I could lose Sandra forever." The entire room froze. And then Keanu opened his eyes again. "And I decided I would not stay silent anymore." The audience leaned forward as if a single breath might break the fragile moment hanging in the air. Oprah felt the shift instantly. She sensed the weight behind Keanu's words. This was no ordinary confession. This was no planned segment. Something real was unfolding, something that touched the quiet corners of fear, love, and the things people never say until life forces them to. Oprah asked, "Keanu, what did you find out last night?" Keanu looked at Sandra first, his eyes soft but full of a hidden ache. She looked back at him, confused, her heart pounding in her chest. She whispered, "Keanu, what are you talking about?" He took a breath that almost seemed shaky, a rare sight for someone so calm. "Last night," he said slowly, I got a message from someone claiming to know the person who spread today's rumor. Sandra felt all the air leave her lungs. She hugged her arms around herself. The rumor had been harsh, cruel, designed to break her. She wasn't ready to hear more about it. Keanu continued gently. They told me that the rumor wasn't random. It wasn't just gossip. It was meant to hurt you deeply, specifically. A loud whisper of shock moved through the audience like a wave. Sandra shook her head. Why would someone do that? I haven't done anything to anyone. Keanu stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she and the viewers could focus on every word. Because someone thinks you ruined their life. Someone who believes you owe them something. Someone who convinced themselves that destroying your name would finally give them peace. Sandra's hands shook. Who believes that? Keanu hesitated. His jaw tightened for a moment. Then he said quietly, the girl you saved. The entire room froze. Oprah gasped, stunned. People in the audience covered their mouths. Even the cameramen blinked in disbelief. Sandra felt her legs weaken. She took a small step back. Keanu reached out quickly and steadied her by her arm, guiding her gently so she would not fall. She whispered, no, that can't be true. Why, I never hurt her. Keanu nodded slowly. I know, but she doesn't see it that way anymore. Her life didn't get better after you helped her. She fell into worse situations. She made mistakes. She lost people. And instead of looking at her own choices, she needed someone to blame. Sandra shook her head, tears streaming. But I tried to help her. I genuinely tried. Keanu wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the action so gentle that the audience felt a soft ache inside. He whispered, I know, Sandra. I know what you did for her, but she's hurting. She's lost. And hurting people sometimes hurt the ones who once showed them kindness. Oprah asked softly, how did you find all this out? Keanu looked at her. The person who contacted me sent proof, screenshots, voice notes. The girl admitted everything in a message to someone she trusted. She said she was tired of watching Sandra succeed. She said she hated seeing Sandra happy while she felt like her own life was falling apart. She said ruining Sandra would make her feel powerful again. Sandra covered her mouth, overwhelmed, devastated. Keanu, this is heartbreaking. Keanu nodded. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to make your pain worse. But then I saw the rumor explode online. I saw you trending for all the wrong reasons. I saw the comments. I saw how people rushed to attack you without knowing anything. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. And I realized that if I didn't stand beside you now, you might break in a way you can't recover from. Sandra stared at him with wide eyes, filled with gratitude and ache. Why do you care this much? She whispered. Keanu looked directly into her eyes, and for a moment the entire world seemed to disappear. Even the audience felt as if they had stepped into a silent bubble. Every heart waited. Every camera held still. Keanu took one careful breath. Because I have already lost too many people I care about, he whispered, and I am not ready to lose you too. A stunned silence filled the room. Sandra blinked fast. Keanu, what do you mean? He swallowed hard, emotion thick in his voice. You don't know this, Sandra, but last night I had a dream. A dream where I walked into a room and you were gone, not physically but emotionally gone, broken, empty, and when I woke up, I realized something terrifying. Oprah leaned forward. What did you realize? Keanu's voice trembled in a way that made everyone sit perfectly still. I realized that if the world kept attacking you like this, if people kept tearing you apart, I might one day walk into a world where Sandra Bullock no longer smiled. And I knew I couldn't live with that. Not again. Sandra covered her heart, tears falling freely. Keanu stepped closer, his voice deep and soft. So I chose to be here before anything worse could happen. I chose to tell the truth. I chose to stand beside you openly. Sandra whispered, Keanu, I don't know what to say. He gently took her hands. Then let me say it for you, he whispered. The audience held their breath. I will protect you now, even if you don't think you deserve it. The studio felt like it had slipped into another world. A world where time slowed, where emotions were louder than applause, where truth felt heavier than any script ever written. Sandra stood there shaking, not because she was weak, but because for the first time in years, someone was standing between her and the storm instead of watching her face it alone. Oprah's voice finally broke the silence. Keanu, when you say you can't lose Sandra, what exactly do you mean? Keanu looked at Sandra, not rushing, not hiding. His eyes softened in a way that made even the strongest hearts in the room feel fragile. "I mean," he said slowly, "that she has been a part of my life in ways most people will never understand." Sandra swallowed hard. She whispered, "Keanu, please don't make this harder." He shook his head gently. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because the truth is long overdue." The audience held their breath. Some wiped tears without even noticing. The emotional energy in the room felt alive, like everyone was sharing the same heartbeat. Keanu took a step closer to Sandra. "Years ago, when we were filming together, I was going through one of the darkest periods of my life. Hardly anyone knew. People saw me smiling, laughing, being the polite guy. But inside, I was falling apart." Sandra's eyes widened. "Keanu, why didn't you tell me?" He gave a soft, sad smile. "You were struggling too. I didn't want to add more weight to your shoulders, but what you don't know is that you saved me in small ways, in silent ways. You brought light into moments when I didn't even realize I was sitting in the dark." Sandra blinked fast, stunned. I didn't know." Keanu continued, "You don't realize how kind you are, Sandra. You don't realize how powerful your presence can be. You think kindness is just something small you do without thinking. But sometimes, it keeps someone alive. Sometimes it holds someone together just a little longer." Sandra covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. Keanu's voice dropped to a deep whisper. "And that's why it destroyed me to imagine you feeling alone today. You once helped me stay standing, so I'm here to keep you standing too." Oprah placed a hand on her chest again, visibly moved. The audience stayed silent, hanging on every word. Sandra wiped her tears slowly. "Keanu, I never knew you felt that. I never imagined I meant anything that deep to you." Keanu nodded. "Because you never look at yourself the way others look at you. You see yourself as someone ordinary, someone just trying to do her best. But to me, and to many others, you're someone who changes lives without even trying." Sandra felt her knees weaken again. Keanu gently guided her to sit on a chair placed at the edge of the stage. He knelt in front of her, something no one, not even Oprah, expected. The audience gasped softly. Oprah whispered, stunned, "Keanu, you don't need to kneel." But he did. He stayed there, looking up at Sandra with complete honesty. "You deserve someone who sees your heart before your mistakes, someone who sees your truth before the noise, someone who refuses to believe lies about you." Sandra whispered, "But why now? Why speak when you stayed silent all these years?" Keanu exhaled slowly. "Because last night's message wasn't the only thing I learned." Sandra looked at him, confused. "What else?" Keanu hesitated, his eyes glistening for the first time. "I found out that the girl, the one you saved, she is planning something worse." The audience stiffened. Oprah leaned in. "Worse, what do you mean?" Keanu lowered his voice, but it carried a terrifying weight. "She plans to release a video tomorrow, a long one, filled with lies, twisted memories, edited clips. She wants to make the world turn against Sandra completely." Sandra's breath caught in her throat. No, she would." Keanu nodded painfully. "She believes it's the only way to deal with her own guilt. She thinks destroying you will make her feel free." Sandra trembled. "But I helped her. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't expect anything." Keanu reached for her hands again. "And that's the tragic part, Sandra. Sometimes kindness doesn't heal a broken heart. Sometimes it scares it. Sometimes the person you saved remembers that moment not as hope, but as a reminder of the moment they realized how lost they were." She shook her head helplessly. "I don't want revenge, Keanu. I don't want her to suffer." Keanu looked at her softly. "I know, that's why I'm here." He turned to the audience, his voice steady and strong. "I'm here to make sure that when her video comes out, the world will already know the truth." The audience erupted with emotional whispers. Oprah nodded slowly, understanding. "You came to protect her before the damage happened." Keanu nodded. "Yes, because she deserves a chance to be seen as who she really is." Sandra whispered, her voice breaking, "Keanu, why do you care so much about my heart?" He looked into her eyes with a truth that made the whole room feel warm and fragile. "Because you cared about mine when I thought no one did." Sandra cried openly now, no longer trying to hide it. Keanu gently brushed her tears away again, his touch steady, grounding, safe. And then he said something that deepened the silence in the room even more. And because there is one more truth I haven't told you yet. The audience collectively inhaled. Sandra whispered, "One more truth." Keanu nodded slowly, painfully. "Yes, and it changes everything." The lights in the studio felt dimmer even though they had not changed. It was the atmosphere, thick, trembling, alive with emotion, that made everything feel softer, heavier, more intimate. People in the audience sat completely still, afraid to breathe too loudly. Oprah watched Keanu with an expression no one had seen on her before, an expression that held respect, shock, and something close to awe. Sandra looked at Keanu, her heart racing. Her voice shook when she whispered, "Keanu, what truth? What are you hiding?" Keanu took a slow breath, as if choosing each second carefully. He didn't stand. He remained kneeling in front of her, his hands gently holding hers, grounding her while his own heart seemed to tremble under the weight of what he was about to reveal. He whispered, "Sandra, the reason I came here today, the reason I couldn't stay silent, is because something happened that made me realize I might never get another chance to tell you this." The audience leaned in, someone sniffled, someone else silently cried. The tension was delicate, like a thin thread pulled tight between two hearts. Sandra's voice cracked, "Tell me, please." Keanu swallowed hard. "Last night, after I learned about the rumor, after I heard about the video she plans to release, I was already overwhelmed. I was angry. I was scared for you. I didn't sleep. I walked around my living room for hours." His voice softened again. "And then at 3 in the morning, I got another message." Sandra tensed. "From who?" Keanu's eyes lowered for a moment. "From someone who said they were worried about you. Someone who said you hadn't been yourself. Someone who said they saw pain in your eyes lately, a pain even you don't fully understand." Oprah whispered, "What did the message say?" Keanu looked at Sandra again, his gaze steady, deep, full of emotion. "It said that you had been struggling in silence for months, that you cried at night, that you felt alone even in crowded rooms, that the world's expectations were slowly breaking you." Sandra's lips trembled. She looked away, ashamed even though she shouldn't be. "Keanu, I didn't want anyone to know." He lifted her chin gently. "I know, and that is exactly why I needed to be here today." The audience felt their hearts tighten. Pain, compassion, understanding all blending into one. Keanu continued, "Sandra, the truth I haven't told you yet is that I knew you were hurting long before last night. I didn't need the message to see it. I saw it months ago." Sandra blinked fast, confused. "How I tried to hide it." He nodded gently. "You did, but I know you. I know the way your smile changes when you're pretending. I know the way your laugh sounds when you're tired inside. I know the way your eyes get quiet when you're carrying too much." She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. Keanu pulled her hands gently away and held them again. "You once told me that being strong means pretending nothing hurts. But that's not strength, Sandra. That's survival, and you shouldn't have to survive alone." Oprah took a deep breath, whispering, "Keanu, what exactly are you trying to say?" Keanu stood slowly, not to pull away, but to bring Sandra to her feet too. He held both her hands, looking into her eyes as if trying to speak to her soul. "I'm trying to say," he whispered, "that I should have been there for you earlier, years earlier." Sandra's breath hitched. "Keanu." He shook his head softly. "I kept my distance because I thought it was better. I thought it was what you needed. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I stayed respectful, if I stayed far away, you would be free to build your life without any weight from the past." Sandra stepped closer without realizing it. "But why would your presence ever be a weight?" He breathed out slowly. "Because I thought, if you knew how much you meant to me, it might confuse your life. You had your world, your family, your career, your heart had its own path. I never wanted to interfere." Sandra's eyes widened as understanding began to surface. "Keanu, what are you saying?" The room turned completely silent. Even Oprah didn't dare interrupt. Every eye locked onto him. Every heart beat in painful anticipation. Finally, Keanu exhaled and said the words he had carried for years. "The truth is, I have cared about you for a very long time, in a way I was too afraid to admit." Sandra froze. Keanu's voice trembled for the first time. "I didn't come here only to protect your reputation. I came because I couldn't lose another day pretending I don't feel what I feel." The audience exploded with soft gasps and quiet emotional murmurs. Sandra stepped back, overwhelmed, her hands covering her heart. Keanu, you can't mean that. He took a step toward her, but slowly, respectfully letting her breathe. I mean every word. I have admired you, respected you, and cared for you in a way that goes beyond friendship, beyond co-stars, beyond all of it. Sandra's tears fell silently. Keanu continued, and last night, when I thought the world might break you, when I thought someone might hurt your spirit beyond repair, I realized something that terrified me. Sandra whispered, "What did you realize?" Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with no hesitation. I realized that losing your smile would break me too. The room gasped again, louder this time. Oprah placed a hand over her mouth, stunned by the rawness of it. Keanu's voice steadied. That is the truth I could not hide anymore. Sandra stood there trembling, shocked, emotional, breathless, as the entire world watched the moment unfold. The room felt so full of emotions that even the cameras seemed afraid to move. People in the audience wiped their tears quietly. Oprah leaned forward, frozen in disbelief. And Sandra stood with her hands over her heart, her breath shaking, trying to understand the words Keanu had just said. She whispered, "Keanu, why would you carry something like that alone? Why would you hide something so important for so many years?" Keanu stepped closer but still kept a respectful distance, as if giving her space to breathe. His voice was soft and steady. "Because I didn't want my feelings to be a burden to you. You were building your life. You had dreams, challenges, heartbreaks, joys, and I never wanted to complicate your journey." Sandra wiped her tears slowly. "But you were never a burden, never. You were always one of the few people who made me feel safe." Keanu looked down for a moment, gathering courage. "I didn't know that. I always thought you were surrounded by people who could protect you better, care for you better, support you better." Sandra shook her head. "You don't understand, there were times when I felt completely alone, even with people around me. But you, every time you showed up in my life, even in small ways, I felt seen. I felt understood." Keanu's eyes softened, and there was a quiet emotion in them that made the audience hold their breath again. Oprah finally whispered, "Sandra, how do you feel hearing this?" Sandra took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice, but the truth inside her refused to stay quiet. "I feel," she paused, pressing a hand to her chest, "like someone finally said the thing I didn't even know I needed to hear." Keanu looked up sharply, surprised. She continued, tears falling gently, "All these years I thought kindness had no place in my world anymore. I thought vulnerability was weakness. I thought I had to fight every battle alone. But today, you reminded me that I don't have to." Keanu took a careful step toward her, his face full of emotion. "You don't, not anymore, not if you don't want to." Sandra felt something shift inside her, a wall she had built long ago finally cracking. She whispered, "Keanu, I'm scared." He nodded gently, "I know, so am I." She laughed softly through her tears. "Then what are we supposed to do now?" Keanu reached out very slowly, giving her every chance to step back if she needed to. But she didn't. She stepped closer. He took her hands carefully, holding them as if they were something fragile, something precious. He whispered, "We start by telling the truth. We start by letting the world see that kindness isn't weakness, that standing beside someone isn't drama, it's courage. We show them that we choose compassion over cruelty. We show them that caring is not a crime." Sandra stared into his eyes, her voice barely above a breath. "And what about us?" Keanu's smile was soft, warm, honest. "Us, we take it slow. We let it be real, we let it grow without pressure. No headlines, no expectations, just honesty, just loyalty, just two people trying to protect each other in a world that loves to tear people down." Her shoulders relaxed for the first time in days, maybe even months. I think I'd like that." The audience erupted into gentle applause, not loud, not wild, but emotional, supportive, soft. The sound of people witnessing something rare and beautiful. Oprah wiped her eyes, laughing through her own emotion. "Well, I wasn't expecting this today, but I think the world needed it." Keanu looked out at the audience, his voice steady. "Before the rumor spreads further, before the video releases, I want everyone to remember something important." The room grew quiet again. You don't know people's hearts. You don't know their battles. And sometimes the person you judge the harshest is the one who saved someone's life in silence. Sandra squeezed his hand. Keanu continued, "So before you share a rumor, before you attack someone online, stop and ask yourself, What if I'm hurting someone who has already been hurt enough? Many people in the crowd nodded, wiping tears. Sandra stepped forward slowly, her strength returning. And remember, kindness may not fix every broken person, it may not change every situation, but it will never be wasted, even if the world never sees it. She looked at Keanu with a soft smile. Someone always sees it. Keanu smiled back, his eyes warm. Yes, someone always does. They stood side by side, united not by scandal or drama, but by respect, honesty, and a bond that had survived years of silence. Oprah stepped between them with a hand on each of their shoulders. This, she said softly, is a reminder that humanity still matters. The audience rose in a standing ovation, slow, emotional, sincere. Keanu gently wrapped an arm around Sandra's shoulders, not as a show, not for cameras, but because she leaned into him naturally, without fear. And as the applause filled the room, Sandra closed her eyes, feeling something she had not felt in a long time. Peace. And Keanu felt something too. Hope. As the lights slowly brightened again, Oprah smiled and said, "The world needed this moment. Thank you both for your courage." And for the first time in a very long time, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves walked off a stage not as two people facing separate storms, but as two souls finally standing on the same side.